Hello there, it's Jan at JB Crafts. Thank you for joining me today. I have another project based around the theme of thanks, seeing as it's that time of year where we sort of express thanks either through harvest. I know over in the States you have Thanksgiving, which is coming up at the end of the month, and the autumn season or fall season as well. So I've gone very much down that theme today and combined the two. We've got the autumn colours, the autumn leaves, and then we've got the give thanks as the sentiment. So very, very straightforward. I've just included a little bit of die cutting to create some interesting shape on the background, and I pulled out one of my very old autumn paper pads to choose some of the colours for the paper. I'll show you that in a second. And then I have got a vellum cut out leaf on here that's been embossed, dry embossed with some script, and then I've got a coloured one out of some of the scrap from this paper which has been embossed with gold embossing powder. So I'm going to show you how I've done that today. The rest of it is very straightforward. It's just using dies and again having a look what's in your stash. So yeah, it's a 6x6 design, very, very straightforward. As I say, I've not done anything fancy with it today. I've just put a nice little sentiment inside, added a couple of leaves. I didn't have the same shape leaf, but it's fall and they're all leaves, so just to tie it in with a couple of the colours that I've used on the outside. And that's going to be my make for today. So I'll talk you through the thought process as I was doing it. There was a couple of changes as I went along and I'll explain why. So yeah, let's get into the tutorial. As I say, nice and straightforward. I started off with a shop bought, just a normal 6x6 card, and these are out of a card kit, and they do actually measure the 6 inches. When I'm making this size card, it normally works out at 5 3/4 inches because that's the largest we can get out of a piece of A4 here in the UK. If you wanted to make the 6x6, you'd need a piece of 12-inch card that you could cut in half and then score down the center at 6 inches. So yeah, this one is actually 6 inches square. So my mat layers have come down to be that sort of 1/4 inch less. So I took my piece that I wanted to work on, and I've got just a white background. We're going to add the paper layers to this so that it's easier than trying to fit them in another way. So this one actually measures 5 1/2 inches square. And then when I had this done, I decided I wanted a nice little border around it. So the gold was the obvious choice for this. And I have chosen some of that matte gold, one of my favourite cardstocks. I'm getting very low on it. I'm going to have to source some more. And that one measures 5 3/4 inches. So you can see we've got those nice sort of staggered little borders today. I have cut the middle out of it purely because it is one of my best, most favourite cards. So yeah, I'm not going to see all that in the middle, and I can just see that my plate looks as if it's caught when I've die cut this, that edge. So I'm just going to press. Yeah, you won't see this by the time the mat's over it. So what we're going to do is we're going to cover this one with the design paper, then we're going to mat and layer it, and then we're going to add it onto our card. So let's pop those two pieces to one side for a second. We don't need these just yet. We're going to work on this piece that was 5 1/2 inches square. Now my paper pad, like I said, is a very, very old one. It's a signature collection by Crafter's Companion, and I dread to think it's a fair few years. Some of you may have it in your stash, might be sort of tucked away with all your autumn fall sort of things. It's one that I haven't used an awful lot. I have the 6x6 in this as well, and I've used that more, but there are some beautiful fall themed papers in here. So I just took 1 or 2 out. I pulled one of these out. I've got the one with the different coloured leaves on, orange leaves. I took this one with the green leaves on, and I had this one with the brown leaves on. So I'd got 3 typical autumn colours, and then the final one, the 4th one, have I got one of those left? I wanted there's one that has a script on it. I don't know whether I've used all those or not. Let me just see if I can. I have got a piece of it. This one, it's got a beautiful sort of script pattern over the top of it, so I've used that one as well. So yeah, autumn morning. Whatever you've got in your stash, you know, depending on what you've got in there, you may have other autumn collections that will work. And what I did is I took the pieces of paper and I cut 3-inch strips off them. So across the width of the paper here, that's that one with the text on, and I wanted the lighter end of it, and I just cut 3-inch strips off it. So you can see here I've got the piece from this end here. I used the other half of this piece on the original sample. You can just see a little bit of it peeping out at the bottom here. So that was the way that I've done it, and I've done that with all the paper pieces. I've cut a 3-inch strip off the top just so that I'd got room to then die cut the other pieces with this little scalloped edge die, and I'll show you how I've done that. So I have got some pieces left of paper, and they will go back in my paper pad for storage. And this one I want to go on the bottom here. Now they are slightly wider because I just cut the 12-inch length in half, but we can trim this as we go along. But I want that nice sort of, I might go with the dark corner in that edge there. And this one's going to stick straight on the bottom. So I'm going to get that one stuck down because the others are going to overlap it. So again, using my all-purpose glue, which is my favourite glue for sticking paper and cardstock together. So we're going to go on the back of here. I'm going to stick the whole of this piece down, even though some of it's going to be covered. Just left a little gap at that end because it is slightly wider than what I need. And we'll get this one put in this corner here. So I want to get that level with the bottom of the paper and onto that left-hand side. And then we'll get that one stuck down. So I'm just going to spread that glue out underneath there. I've got my cloth handy in case any of it seeps out the edge there. Okay, so making sure that it's level with that bottom, level with this. We're going to ink round the edge anyway. And then I'm just going to trim off anything that's overhanging that panel that we started off with there. Okay. My scissors are actually covered with a non-stick coating, but I do occasionally get a little bit of sticky on them. And then what I did with the other 3 strips is, as I've actually taken, and again, I had a rummage through the stash. I'd got a vision of what I wanted this to look like. And I had a rummage through the stash. And again, this is even older than the autumn collection. This is one of the very first collections I think that I bought when I started working for the company, and that was in 2016. So it's a very old collection called Shabby Chic, and this was actually a triple die. So you've got this lovely ornate border and then a scalloped and a plain edge. So all I did was use the plain edge one here. I just wanted something that would give me this scalloped effect along the bottom, and you can see there, if I put that against the card, all I've done is popped it at an angle, and I've cut one this way, and this is going to go across here. Then I switched it out and cut it the opposite way, so that we're going to go back this way again. And then the top one I've cut the first way, and we're going to put this one on here. Now they're all slightly wider so that I can get them positioned where I want them. I find it difficult if everything's cut to exactly the right size. I'd rather have it a little bit too wide, and this was easy because I'd got that 12-inch strip. I just cut it in half at 6 inches so that I'd got half of the pieces of paper for this card and half of them to recreate it. And I'd rather have that so that I can position them and decide where I want them to go. So again, we're going to use that same glue, and I'm going to put a fine layer of that over the back of it, and then decide roughly where I want this to go on the page. And I want a little bit of the green showing in the corner, and then I'm going to lift it so that it's slightly higher at one side and get that one pressed down. Now I like to do this as I go along so that I can see exactly where everything is. So I am going to snip that overhanging piece off while I'm working along, rather than leaving it all while the end. Just using that cardstock as a guide, and then I can see exactly where that's going to sit. And then we're just going to work our way up the page. So we're going to go with the brown next, and this one's going to sort of go the other way like so. So I'm going to position this one so that we've got a little bit of that orange peeking out underneath, and then we're going to do the same again. So just that fine layer of glue, and that is going to make this panel nice and rigid as well, because this glue dries really hard. And again, I'm going to lay that one on and just decide roughly where I want it before I commit to sticking it down. We're going to use this one just as a guide on the top there. I'll lift that one up a little bit there. And that's the beauty of having the wet glue. I'm not worried whether it runs straight or not. The pattern was an all over pattern. If it, that's why I put the script at the bottom, because I didn't want that on an angle. So if you do have a pattern that's got a orientation in, you might have to be a little bit more careful how you would place the pieces on the card. So again, I'm going to take these off before I add that last bit, just so that I can see where everything sits. Like so. Just spread that out, and then we've got this last panel, which I can actually pop right to that top corner, and I think that's going to do the trick there. Yep. So we're going to put the glue on again. And then I can line this one up with that top edge now, like so. So I'm going to turn it round, tap it down, tap it across so that that one's lined up in the corner. And then we've got that lovely sort of wavy scallopy bit going on there. So again, just spread that glue out underneath, make sure that everything's running nice and straight, and then we can just snip off that final piece, and we've got our finished design there. So yeah, just a bit different, and it's a great way of using. I mean, I actually cut into some brand new sheets of paper, which is not like me. I normally use scraps, but when I had a look through my scrap box, I didn't have much in the line of sort of autumn feel. So that's where we've got to there. I'm going to just pop that lid on that one for a second, pop those back, and then what I'm going to do, just to finish this off, and you won't be surprised here if you know me, is just take my ground espresso ink and my ink sponge dauber, and I am just going to go all the way around the edge now, which will just bring everything together. I had already inked the curved edges of the pattern paper with the same ink, but now where we've trimmed it all, I'm just going to bring this all the way around the edge. It covers up the white edge on the card, and I think it just sort of brings everything together and makes it look like one piece. If you're not into the inks, you can leave this stage out. I just love the effect it gives. So that's my ink in there, and that's going to be my piece now that's going to go on top of here. So what I'm going to do is, I've got some tape on this piece ready. I've got a stash of tape that I'm trying to use up. So I'm going to pop this one down on here. It's just got a very narrow border all the way round. So once I've got one of those in place, I know that the rest of them are all going to be all right. So I can flip it over and take the rest of the liner out of there. Try and do it without ripping it. I got a bit overzealous there with that one, so we need to find the rest of that. Come on, there we go, and just pull that out as well. And then once I've got all those positioned, we can just take those pieces out and get that stuck down. As I say, I've got a massive stash of tape that I discovered in my cupboard, and I'm slowly working my way through it, all from different companies and providers. So yeah, just working my way through it. And then we're going to pop this one over the top here, and because I'm going on to the shiny card, I'm going to do the same again. I'm going to come round, and it's just a narrow tape there, and I'm just going to come round all the four edges with that. And that's not going to have, I'm not going to have to worry about any wet glue seeping out onto the speciality cardstock with that lovely shiny finish on it. So we'll pop that all around the edge, and then what I am going to do is the same again. I'm just going to take some of these out, and this is a really great tip if you're using adhesive like this, because it does grab very quickly. So all I'm doing is just lifting the ends of the tape. I am going to pop a little bit of this in the middle because this is going to hit the card blank itself. So just a bit in there to make sure that the centre's anchored and that we don't get any sort of ballooning underneath it. And then make sure everything's working the right way. I want my card to open in a traditional way and my scallops facing downwards, and then you can get this, wriggle this into position, and once you're happy with that, again apply some pressure and just pull these tapes out. It's a really nice easy way of getting it in position when something is a bit more sort of fast grabbing. Like the wet glue, you can slide it into place, but that's a real good way of getting everything nice and simple. Now, I mean, this on its own might be enough. You might just want to put your sentiment on there and that could be it. But you know me, I like lots of different layers and lots of interest. So what I started off with then, again, this is that same collection, that autumn morning collection. I love these. I love the size of them. And we have got that lovely leaf here from this one. So what I've done is I've cut that twice, and I cut it once in the coloured paper in the scrap, and then I was going to have this as my feature on here, and very quickly realised that it needed something behind it. I needed to sort of build it behind there. So the next step was to build a panel with some of the scrap that was left over, and this measures the 5.5 inches tall by 1 3/4 inches wide, and I've used a scrap of the brown here, matted it on the gold, and I'm going to pop that in the background here. I've just wound a little bit of twine round it and I have put some tape on this ready. So again, if we just do the same trick, just take the ends away, and then I want this to come in about 1/2 inch from this edge, just to break some of that detail up a little bit there. So we're going to put that down there, and this is actually the same depth as the pattern paper. And then once I'm happy, again, I can pull this out and commit to sticking those edges down. So that broke it up a little bit, but it still wasn't enough. There wasn't enough difference between this and the background. So this is where these came in. This is one of my label dies, one of my Sizzix label dies. I think it was a Tim Holtz collection, and I've cut out one of the circles there and one of the label dies, again just out of some scraps. Felt it needed some lighter colour on it, so this was a piece out of the scrap box. Literally, it's just a piece of abstract neutral colour out of the scrap box, and I thought, right, we'll go for this behind here to start and build up a little bit of detail. Okay, so I got that far with it, and then I still wasn't 100% happy, so along came the vellum, and I've cut one of the leaves in vellum, and then I have just embossed it with a generic script embossing folder there. And this one then I'm going to put behind here to just lift it a little bit. So I was getting there, I was getting a bit happier with it, but because this was my focal point, I decided to treat this to a little bit more detail. So let's pop all that to one side. We're going to take the leaf, I'm going to bring in my stamping platform here, and I use this regularly. Again, another generic script, but this one's a stamp. It's an acrylic stamp, just called Classic Script. Anything that's got script on it. It's not particularly legible, and it's a nice size. It's a little 6x4 one, this, and I use it such a lot for things that I just want to have a little bit of detail on. So what I'm going to do, I've got that in my stamp positioner. I'm going to put this in here with a little bit of just a few of those dots on the back to hold it in place, and I want the leaf to go this way when it's on the card, so I'm going to bring the script across it like so. I'm going to pop that in there, and I think that looks about right for what I'm wanting to do. So equipment for embossing, I've got my anti-static pad, got my Versamark ink, and I've got some gold embossing powder at the ready. So let's just take the lid off there. I've got my little spoon to use in there. I'm going to treat it to a little bit of anti-static powder just to help the embossing powder stick to the text rather than all over. It's always a good place to start. And then I'm just going to ink across the middle section of my stamp because I don't need the whole thing. So I'm just going to go across the middle there with the embossing ink, give that a good coating, and then transfer that nicely. Give it a good press onto that leaf. Make sure it's transferred, just give it time for that ink to soak into the paper. And I can see that that's done the job there, so I'm just going to release that off here now. Try not to touch where the embossing is. I will sort that out in a little while. And then I want to grab my tweezers and just pick a spot that's not got much embossing on, which I think is down here at the bottom. And then we're going to pop the gold all over here. And that should just stick nicely to the areas that have got the embossing powder, the embossing ink on there. A little bit of fluff on that one, so that looks fine. So we'll get rid of that and pop the lid on just so that there aren't any disasters happening. It won't be the first time. And then I'm going to bring in my heat tool. And again, when you heat embossing, it pays to get your heat tool up to temperature. So I'm just going to give that a second to warm up. The hotter it is, the quicker it will melt the powder and the less damage it does with regards to bowing the card. So again, I'm just going to sort of go across here until I see a bit of it start to turn, start to melt. And then when it's got to, you can tell when it's at the right temperature because all of a sudden it will start melting that embossing powder. And again, I love this. It's one of those techniques that very rarely gets old, no matter how many times you do it. So all I'm going to do then is just chase it across. As soon as it's gone nice and golden shiny, I can move away from that area. See the difference now from where the dry powder is to the embossed. And again, just focus that heat on the area that's still wanting to melt. And the minute that it's all gone nice and golden shiny, we can remove the heat and we're all done. So nice and quick and simple. And I'm just going to leave that to dry for a second now. So the other thing that I prepared ready was my sentiment. And again, this is from an old sentiment set that I've got. They're all different ones that I've got in a packet. I put all the thanks together and I've actually die cut that and it looks like so. So it's got a shadow layer which I've cut out of the vellum to just match the vellum leaf, bring that in. And then I've cut the wording layer in the gold, again to link it to the gold in the background, and that's going to go across here. So that was all the die cutting. We'll pop that back up there for a second so I can get this bit stuck down just while this leaf's drying. I'm going to use my acrylic glue for this one. I'm getting to the end of this one at the minute, so there's not a massive amount left. So let's just let you go for a minute because we need the tweezers there. And I'm just going to grab this, and all I'm going to do is put little dots of glue behind where the lettering is. So I don't need a lot, just to get this anchored in place. And then I am going to tap some of that off because I don't want it to sort of squeeze out behind the vellum. So I am going to tap some of it off, and I've got my cloth here. I usually just give it a press on there. You can see where the extra glue's come away. And then this one is just going to go across the bottom. I want some of that script showing. I can just see a little bit there where it's squeezed out, but the glue does dry matte and clear, so it's not too bad if it does get in the way. And then I went through my stash. I was talking to my husband when I did this, and I was looking for the word give to go with this. I wanted to give thanks. And I went through my stash, which, as a lot of you know, is quite substantial. I'm sort of ashamed to admit how much I've got, but a lot of that was accumulated while I was working for a craft company. But yeah, I went through all the stamp sets and I only found one stamp set that had the word give on it. And it wasn't what I wanted. It was a very scripty font, which would have clashed with this font. I wanted something nice and simple to do this. Then I had a look through. I've got some of the Tim Holtz. Again, I've had this such a long time. It's called Chit Chat, and this is made up of lots of little bits that I often use. And there was the word give in here. But again, it was a little bit smaller than what I wanted, and it was bugging me that it had a lowercase letter at the beginning. And those were the only two things that I could find in the whole of the craft room that had the word give on. So what we did is we toddled off to the laptop, and I've just typed this out with a very plain font on my laptop, printed it out, stuck it onto a piece of card, inked around it, and it's the perfect size now to fit in the little gap. So we'll pop that in there. I've put tiny piece of tape on the back of here ready, and then all I'm going to do is it just happened to be the right size to just nestle in here and say give thanks. So that's going to go in there ready, and then we just need to build up our focal point. So this one's going to go half and half, so I am going to bring some little pop dots in because I want to put some on that other half there. So we need to put some round this side that are going to fall over this piece here. So just to bring it up, these are only 1 millimeter deep, so they are going to do the job for me, just to hold it up and not let it bow. And I am going to put some glue on the other side here because that's going to fit on the paper. And then I want this to sort of overhang. We'll go for about there. Okay. Oops, where did you come from? You get out of the way. I've also got some slightly smaller ones of these as well, and I'm going to put one of those on the edge here because this is going to overhang as well. So I just want one of the little small ones under the edge of here, and then again we're going to do the same. And it was just about building something in the background to lift it from the rest of the design, because my initial thought was, do I need to change the leaves into something else? But I wanted to keep with those lovely autumn fall colours. So yeah, it was just a case of building something here that was literally going to break it up away from the background. So almost like a little cluster, and then we can add our leaves into the background. So this one's going to go on here, and I am just going to use a little bit of tape because that's going to be hidden by the other leaf. So I'm just going to put a little bit on here so that we can stick that in place, and then the other leaf is going to go over the top. We're going to add a bit of dimension to that one with the little pop dots again. So I want this one to sort of go, and I embossed it at the angle that I wanted it to go so that the writing was still reasonably straight. It's not perfect, but I didn't want the writing to be going this way, for example. Now this one's cool. I can give it a little bit of shaping on the leaves here, and then I also went round it with one of my gold. I've got some metallic pens by Spectrum Noir, which is a Crafter's Companion product, and I've just gone round the edge of the leaf here to take away the white edge and tone it in with the embossing. So I've just gone all the way around here literally with this and coloured the edge of it to tone in nicely so that it all looks as if it's one piece. And then on the back of here we're going to pop some of those smaller ones again. In fact, I might be able to get away with the bigger ones on some of the leaves. So 1, 2, we'll do a mixture because that one's quite a big space there, and so is there, and then we'll put a little one. That's why I like having the two different sizes. And then we're going to pop this one in place to be sort of the main part of the focal point. So we'll just take the backers off here. And then I am going to add a little bit of glue just because it's going on to different textures. It sort of becomes a habit after a while, this. It's not that the pads aren't sticky, it's just that we've got the vellum on here as well. So it's different surfaces, different textures. And then what I want to do is bring this one sort of this way. I want a bit of the green showing here. And again, I've got that writing reasonably straight there rather than it going up and down. So just be mindful if you're going to use an embossing folder or whether you're going to do the stamping, how it's going to look when it goes on the front of your card. Okay, and I was much happier with that now, having been lifted away from the background there. It did make much difference. It's not a lot, you know, it's only that circle and the little bit of green to link it in here, but it lifted all this off the background and let that focal point sort of shine, doing its thing in the middle there. So again, the only thing I've added to that, those of you that know me well, I've got some gold gems on there, and that's why I wanted to leave part of this showing so that I could add some of the gems to it. And I've just come round here, so to bringing your eye through that focal point and then directing it back to the sentiment at the bottom. So that's the only thing that I've not. I tend not to do them on the sample because obviously I don't always keep these ones. I keep the main ones. Sorry, the one that I've made. This is the sample. And then again, just very, very simple inside. Just had a look through my stamps that are thanks, and I've literally just popped that in the center with a little bit of stamping to pick up those colors from the outside. So that completes a couple of autumn stroke fall stroke Thanksgiving projects, and then we can move on to, I'm going to do the last 6 weeks of the year are going to be my 12 days of Christmas. So 2 Christmas projects a week for the next 6 weeks will take us right up to Christmas, and I've got lots of ideas brewing for that. I just need to clear the craft room so that I can fetch all the Christmas stuff in, and we should be good to go there. So if you've enjoyed this one today, consider giving it a thumbs up for me. If you're new to the channel, it's lovely to have you join us, and I would ask you to consider subscribing and ringing that notification bell so that you get a message each time I upload. That is normally Tuesdays and Saturdays on a regular basis. And yeah, just thank you for joining me. Thank you for the support. I love reading all the comments. I'm a little bit behind with my replies on the comments, but I will catch up with those, and I will be back with the next tutorial, which should have a little bit of a Christmas ring to it. So I'll see you here for that one. Enjoy your day now, and I'll be back soon. Bye bye now.